We created rules for a haunted house that shouldn't exist. Now, as adults, we found a house matching its description. Part 7. Beyond the pungent aroma of what was in the golden containers, it was the safety equipment that clued us into the acidity of the liquid inside them. If I remember my chemistry classes correctly, Jennifer said, hydrofluoric acid can dissolve many things, but not gold. That's why the table, the containers, the key, and the lock on that one chest are all gold. Sure, those containers could be something else, like a beaker made of a plastic that doesn't dissolve. But the gold is a clue to what that substance is. Gold was also very important to alchemists of past eras, Greg observed. Transmutation, the perfection of all matter. Right, Jennifer, right. Now hydrofluoric acid, or something similar to it, could dissolve many plastics, like the plastic of that clear box containing the key. If my guess is right, we can't move those golden containers, Patrick said. They're merged with the table, and the table won't budge. So how do we pour the liquid onto the plastic container? We thought about that one for a while. We don't, I eventually said. That's where the chalk comes in. We don't have all the right shapes to solve the puzzle. We're missing a diamond chalk piece. But I'm thinking, based on their size, we have enough pieces of chalk to overflow one golden container. If we place the plastic box holding the key on the table beneath the container, then put all of the chalk in to raise the liquid level and overflow the acid, whether it's hydrofluoric or something else, we could melt through that box and get the key out. We'd lose the puzzle because we put the wrong shapes in, but we'd get the key to what I'm assuming is the locked chest. A losing strategy, Patrick said. So what's in the locked chest? I think we're meant to find out, I said. We put the clear plastic box with the key in it right up against the triangle shape on the tabletop. I guess we could have chosen any of the shapes, but if any of them had less total volume than the others, we supposed it would be the triangle. Then I donned the safety equipment, the face protection, the respirator, and the gloves. I insisted because it was the puzzle that, so far, seemed most connected to me. My puzzle. I wanted to be the one to risk my life on it if something in the chalk pieces reacted with the acid and it all exploded in my face. I didn't say that last part to my friends because I didn't want them to worry and talk me out of it. I almost went back to that laboratory to get some forceps and a spatula or something to help me put the chalk in without any of the acid splashing up on me. But I really didn't want to see that Frankenstein thing again. It had parts of each of us, and there was something about it. What if, with the strength we'd already gotten a taste of, it had broken free of its straps after we'd left the room? I put that thought down, put my mind to the puzzle in front of me. I told the others to get back, against the walls, to get ready, not just for the chemical reaction but for the entities. I would have asked them to leave the room, but if and when the entities came, I didn't want them to be out, in the hall, carefully so as to avoid splashing. I nudged each piece where I put it on the rim of the open triangle container, letting it slide down while I backed away a little. The substance bubbled and frothed. I did it as quickly as I could while being careful, so that we might take advantage of the bubbling to get the substance overflowing. Sure enough, after all the chalk shapes had been placed in, the liquid inside the golden container overflowed. I stepped back and watched with the others as it melted through the clear container that the golden key was in. At the same time, something clicked in a stuttering way, like a machine failing to get started. And then we heard the entities approaching, in the hallway outside the room. One delay for that jerk to the side. 2, 3. They didn't walk in unison, but you could pick out a few of their footsteps or hoof steps or whatever their lower extremities ended in. We'd failed a puzzle and broken a rule, but intentionally this time. The key, Patrick said, unlocked the other chest. All of us started walking towards the table at once. I was surprised we all remembered the rule about not running. Rule number 4. That rule also stated that the entities could run if we ran. Let me handle it, I said. I've still got my gloves on. I knocked the golden key from the table to the floor in the hopes of getting most or all of the residual acid off. I'd heard stories about people getting poisoned or burned through their gloves. That's why you usually wanted to use a tool like forceps or a spatula to handle such things. Here we go, I said, picking the key up off the floor. I walked as quickly as I could over to the locked chest in the corner of the room, unlocked its golden lock with the golden key, and dropped the key. My friends were there looking over my shoulder by the time I was opening the chest. Inside were more chalk shapes, another circle, another triangle, another square, and a diamond which we had been missing before. We had everything we needed to try again. The entities were getting close. While my friends huddled together in the corner of the room furthest from the entryway, I opened all of the other containers on the table and tried all of them circle for circle, triangle for triangle, square for square and diamond for diamond. As I was doing diamond, Jennifer and Patrick got to yelling. One of the entities was now in the room with us. I did not turn to look, but I was so quick about the diamond shape that some of the liquid splashed up onto my gloved hand. It seared me through the glove. I didn't know if that was due to the acid or some kind of reaction. I cried out in pain and yanked the glove off. The back of my hand was red, but it wasn't too bad looking. However, I knew that chemical burns could have long-term repercussions. Despite being absorbed in my own pain, I just had to look over my shoulder. No entities. Couldn't hear them coming anymore either. My friends were on me inspecting my hand. Nobody thought to bring a bottle of water. Patrick said, "What if we got thirsty?" He shook his head. And then from out of an inner pocket in his sports coat, he took out a water bottle. It had his real estate firm's logo on it. "I came here thinking it was a prank," Jennifer said. "Guess I reckon that we'd have drinks and refreshments inside once the prank was over." "Well," I said, "that butler on the second floor tried to accommodate us. Too bad none of us can eat or drink broken glass." Greg said. We chuckled a little at that, which helped me through the pain. Patrick poured some water from his water bottle over my hand. That helped some more. It still burned like crazy though. Through all that, I hadn't paid the other clicking and the grating nose much attention. One of the tapestries, the one with the well being poisoned, had fallen to the floor, and there was a small opening in its place. It couldn't have been there before, because we'd checked behind the tapestries earlier. When looking for clues, it was a small opening, not a whole lot larger than an air conditioning duct, but large enough for us to climb into it and crawl through. Once again, as with that narrow passage downstairs leading us back, it was dark. Once again, it seemed that something was in there with us. "Sally," Jennifer said at one point. She was in the rear. She'd stopped crawling behind me. We all did. "Is that you? Say something if that's you." We heard movement. "I think it's behind me," Jennifer said. Nearly a whisper. Then the noise stopped. Let's keeping going," Jennifer said. "Good call," I said. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. The crawlway ended abruptly. We'd been hoping it might turn, and that we'd get to see some light. Some of us got a little panicky. "Wait," Patrick said. He was in the front. "I do see a bit of light." There was a succession of banging noises. Then our tunnel got a lot brighter. When we crawled out and hopped down a few feet, we found ourselves back in the third floor anteroom next to the stairs. Patrick had knocked down one of the paintings, one with a bunch of rusted gears. It had been covering the opening. We'd solved the third floor puzzle. We had needed to lose first in order to win, but we'd passed it. According to the rules, we were free to move up the stairs to the next floor, 2 more floors, and then the attic, and the treasure. For now, the 4th floor awaited us. As I went up the stairs with the others, it was once more like I was being watched. Were the entities like Walt the Stairman who, for all I knew, was wedged up against a wall and looking down at us, always there but invisible? Or did they only exist in the house when we broke a rule? Were we any closer to understanding what they were? And why did Walt appear for a moment when I mentioned him the first time? These were the kinds of questions that occupied my thoughts, though I didn't bring them up. I think we were all afraid to invoke Walt's name again on the stairs because of what happened before. We got to the 4th floor landing. In the anteroom were mirrors on opposite walls facing each other. On a large table, there was a dollhouse that looked exactly like the house we were in. A demon was reaching its hand into the open side of the dollhouse. "It's alright," I said. "It's just a doll. Just a life-size doll. Remember?" But we were all tense, and we couldn't stop staring at it as we passed around the dollhouse it had its hand in. The thing was standing outside the dollhouse looking in. Had to be over 6 feet tall. Dark red. Horns. Eyes without irises. Now where had I seen that before? Intently focused on what it played within the house. We'd drawn in that life-size demon doll's appearance years ago in one of Greg's sketchbooks, but I couldn't remember that detail about the eyes. Was it something that house filled in for us? We couldn't help but get closer to the dollhouse on the table, because we had a notion of what we might see inside. Where the dollhouse was open, you could see into the first 4 anterooms along with the stairway, as well as some of the other rooms we had been to. But another detail I wasn't sure whether we had put in as kids: the 5th floor and the attic were completely closed off. They were not part of what we could see into. In the dollhouse, standing in the 4th floor anteroom, the same room we were in now, was a doll of each of us, standing in the same exact places we were standing, wearing the same clothes that we were wearing. The life-size demon doll that was outside the dollhouse with the rest of us. Its clawed hand was wrapped around the Greg doll. "Did we do all this?" Jennifer said. "I don't know," Greg said. He had his new sketchbook open and was beginning to draw or write something in it. But then he noticed me watching. "Greg," I said, "do you still have the old sketchbooks? The ones with our designs in them?" "I already told you. I'm asking again. Do you have them?" "No. Whatever has them," I said. "I think we've got to get them back." "Good luck," Greg said. "You'd have to leave this house and probably search deep in a dump somewhere near where we used to live. If they haven't been pulverized by a trash compactor beyond recognition and become plant food over the years." We opened the door to a sitting room, being the last person out of the anteroom. I glanced back again at the little dollhouse replica of this house and the life-size demon doll standing outside it. It was still reaching in, but now I was sure that its eye, the right eye that I could see, had moved. Its eye was focused on us. "Hurry," I said, pushing the person in front of me. I closed the door as quickly as I could and told the others what I'd seen. I remember wishing we had put a lock on that door when we were kids. We talked about how, as we got towards the top, more of the things we'd put into the house were going to try to get us to run. To break rule number 4. That was how we had designed it to be. And that was probably what the house was going to try to do when it filled in the gaps. Like with the movement of that demon's eye. But we didn't have much of a respite to sit around and chat. Already our hands were full with the 4th floor sitting room. We'd called it a sitting room years ago. But I suppose it might be called a lounge or waiting room today. A place where guests waited for entry to a ballroom beyond. There were more mannequins in this sitting room, dressed in formal party attire. They sat on upholstered benches, chairs, and couches gathered at the center of the room and against the walls. They held glass receptacles of various murky-colored fluids. It was unclear whether these were for alchemy or for drinking. The container shapes as well as the liquids were ambiguous. There were nasty oddities enough in that room, including stuffed animals mounted on the wall. One of those animals was a human head. I wasn't sure if it was intended to be real. Recalling the sketchbook designs, we'd merely drawn a human head in there. Greg's idea and probably his drawing, too. In one corner was a tall curio cabinet, all glass doors with wooden support. Within that curio cabinet were many jars of preserved things, from the relatively mundane, like pickled pig's feet, to the kinds of stuff that got under your skin and stayed there, like an elephant fetus. I kept thinking about how its pale, gelatinous proto-trunk wrapped around its partially developed body. I wandered closer to the curio cabinet and its jars of preserved things, because I thought I saw a heart in there, maybe human. But Jennifer stopped me. "You got a trap over there," she said, pointing to an inconspicuous closet door next to the cabinet. That closet door started to open. It seemed that I'd already triggered the pressure plate beneath the floor by the time the door was opening. However, I was already well away. Another mannequin servant came out, like the butler from downstairs. It, too, came out in a hurry, with all the force of a very large spring. Its forearm was draped with coats, scarves, and purses that dangled back and forth when it stopped. "Might I take that from you?" it said in a recorded voice, similar to the mannequin butler's downstairs. Sticking out from between the items it was carrying were the sharpened ends of coat hangers, unbent and facing outward like spear tips. Seemed it was wanting to take my life from me. "Now, where were you when we entered the house?" Patrick said to the mannequin. He started to take off his coat. "Just kidding. I think I'll hold on to this." It was a good thing, though, that we had triggered that trap, because the door into the ballroom was actually locked. Unlike with the puzzles, which we didn't have much prior knowledge of because we had not directly created them as kids, we knew the solution already. We knew the key to be in a purse or a coat pocket, in one of the things draped over the mannequin servant's arm. We found it easily enough, as we were heading over to the ballroom door with the key. However, we heard a song coming from the ballroom, from behind the door. "I know you. I walked with you once upon a dream." It didn't take us long to recognize. It was the Sleeping Beauty song from the 1959 film, rather than coming from an old record player like that other song downstairs. However, this one seemed to be coming from a person in the next room who was singing. We thought it sounded like Sally. This was not something we'd planned into the designs at all. After saying as much out loud, we quickly unlocked the door and burst into the ballroom. But the singing stopped as soon as the door had opened. There was no one yet. Anyway, the ballroom was pretty empty except for some rows of wooden chairs next to the stage. We sat in 4 of them, close together, and we waited. We waited for the heavy, reddish-brown curtains like the color of old blood, to open. After a minute of us sitting in silence, broken only by our heavy breathing and my heart thumping in my chest, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The curtains swooshed open. Lit up on the stage was a ventriloquist dummy and a man. Rather, a ventriloquist dummy and the corpse of a man. The corpse sagged in its chair. Its tuxedo was barely recognizable. Rotting goop pooled at its feet. As soon as the curtains had opened, the smell had hit us like a dump truck carrying dead bodies. But the ventriloquist dummy on the corpse's hand was upright, facing us. It began to talk. My, what a lovely audience we have here. Are you ladies and gentlemen ready to see some magic?" The dummy assaulted us with a series of bad jokes, many of them having to do with its dead and decaying partner. It proceeded to do some equally bad card tricks, at one point flinging the cards down directly at us. "Tough crowd," it said. "But not to worry. Ladies and gentlemen, my final trick is going to put you on pins and needles, and leave you there. Well, one of you. I'll need a volunteer from the audience. Please note that it is necessary for someone to volunteer. Otherwise, things could get very awkward. Very awkward indeed." At that point, the dummy talked in a different voice, like its mouth was partly closed, as if it was giving a voice to the dead man that propped it up. "Hey, partner, it's not considered volunteering if it's required." While the dummy argued with an inanimate, rotting corpse, the rest of us debated who should go up. We thought we had a pretty good idea of what we'd face up there. All of us started to say we would be the one to do it. This was both a blessing and a curse, because while it showed how much we cared about each other, it also made it more difficult to decide. "No offense guys," Jennifer said, "but the rest of you aren't exactly petite. We need the smallest person of us to go up there." "That's me." "That may be true," Patrick said, "but Greg's bonier than you are. Taller, but a little thinner. Not that I'm trying to throw him under the bus, just pointing that out." "Look," I said, "maybe we should draw straws or something. There's gotta be something here we could use for straws." "No, it's fine," Greg said. His face was contorted. "I'll do it." We argued back and forth for a while, but after little progress, decided to just let Greg do it. We thanked him a lot. "Want me to hold on to that sketchbook for you?" I said. "Sure," he said. He opened it up and wrote or drew some things with his pencil, then sighed and handed me both his pencil and sketchbook. I opened up the sketchbook and flipped through it as he walked up to the stage. There were notes and rough sketches about some of the things we'd seen, as well as some notes and diagrams for the puzzles we'd solved. On the last page, before a whole lot of blank pages, was this note: "You guys are the best, no matter what happens. Silver lining, we got the chance to do this together. If something does happen to me, tell my wife and kid. Well, make something up. Whatever's clever." Gee, by the time I'd glanced up from his sketchbook, Greg was on the stage with the dummy and the corpse. The dummy whooped and clapped at Greg as he approached. The dead body in the chair jerked around because of the movement of the dummy on its arm, causing it to deposit yet more fluid and matter to the puddle at its feet. Then, the dummy yelled, "Bring out the Iron Maiden." Here was the other torture trap alluded to in that mannequin's open book in the second floor drawing room. A large metal cabinet, its shape suggesting a bloated human body, screeched forward. It moved from out of darkness towards the front of the stage. It must have been on a rail. I could not see who, if anyone, was pushing it. The head-like protrusion at the top of the Iron Maiden depicted a stylized human face caught in the extremes of pain. When the Iron Maiden stopped moving forward, it opened up, revealing the sharp metal spikes that covered the inside of it. The dummy said, "Now get on in, and make yourself as big as you can. Think big thoughts. Trust me, I'm a magician." We did not trust the dummy. By the way, never trust a ventriloquist dummy whose partner is a rotting corpse. According to what we'd put in one of Greg's old sketchbooks years ago, the spikes should be just long enough or just short enough to not touch the person inside if they were very careful. If, however, any pressure whatsoever were applied to those spikes, the spikes would extend fully and pierce the body within. Greg waved to us from the stage. We told him to be careful. I firmly believe that all of us, Greg included, were praying that the trap would perform as we designed it. A moment later, Greg was inside. Another moment and it was closing. Then it snapped shut. We heard muffled screams. Blood oozed out from the bottom of the Iron Maiden torture device. The dummy laughed and laughed. We called out to Greg, started to rush the stage. I was on the verge of breaking the house's rule about running, when we heard Greg's muffled voice from within the Iron Maiden. "It's okay, guys," he said. "I'm alright. The house is doing that, not me." When the Iron Maiden opened up, he was covered in what looked like blood. Thankfully, none of it was his own. We used the stage curtains to try to get that nasty stuff off him. No telling whose blood it was, or if it was even blood. It was thick, weird. The texture and smell were off. The dummy was cackling at us. "Get out of here," it said between its laughter. "Show's over. The door's unlocked. Don't let it hit you on the way out." I can't say we were happy, but we were eager to oblige. We got out and found ourselves in a hall. It was similar to the one directly beneath us on the previous floor. Yet it did not have a pit with leg snare ropes. There was another trap, one we anticipated but was still difficult to navigate. The smooth floor at one point shifted beneath us, becoming a ramp. We had to hold on to each other and the walls to keep from running downhill unintentionally. If you ran, you broke rule number 4. Not only would the entities come after you, but they would be running. We didn't know if they'd stop running if we stopped. Didn't want to test it. Not only that, the rules suggested they'd be faster than us. In a way, this prepared us for the puzzle room beyond, the 4th floor puzzle. Like both the hallway on the previous floor and this one, the puzzle room seemed to be the same size as the one beneath us, about like a slightly below average sized bedroom. We walked in and were yet again taken aback by what was there. What dominated this puzzle room was this gigantic, people-sized hamster or gerbil wheel at the center. Here again, the center of the room was where the puzzle should be according to our designs. Another standout object was a statue, nearly 5 feet high, of a white elephant. It was next to a wall. A broom with a dustpan attached to it was in a corner. On the other side of the room there was a coffee table with a sparkling orb made of bottle caps on top of it. There was a mound of something like sand or salt on the floor next to the entrance of the room. On one wall was an illustration that we immediately recognized as Greg's. It was this cartoony, poster-sized thing showing a giant hamster in a run-around wheel, sprinting like mad. Its wheel had broken loose from its base and was creating a path of devastation through a city. Dead bodies and busted-up vehicles were in its wake. It was goofy, It was Grizzly. It was Greg. We all remembered Greg putting that into this room years ago. Even though back then we did not consciously know that it would be a clue to the puzzles we hadn't created. Like for the other clues in the other puzzles, we all looked at him and waited. There were only 2 more people whose puzzle this could be, Sally or Greg. Greg's illustration seemed to give us our answer. Okay, Greg said. Okay, I never told anyone this. Well, other than Sally. But I used to have a pet hamster. Seems like a small thing, but it was a big deal to me. Never had a pet since. This was before we'd made a regular occurrence out of our haunted house designing back in that apartment complex. I had this pet hamster. Right. A very good pet hamster. About as well behaved as a hamster could be. Played well. Never bit me once. But it bit my aunt when she stuck her finger into its terrarium and was waving it around, as some animals will do if you get too crazy with them. And she let that bite get infected. Well, he licked his lips. He stared down at his shoes. At some point she had to go to the hospital for her infection, caused by such a simple thing. Just a harmless little hamster bite that she clearly hadn't taken care of like she should. She got better from that infection, but that wasn't the end of it. Kept complaining about what she'd suffered and about her hospital bill, and about how that hamster was a threat to other people. One thing led to another, until one day she went into my room in our apartment while I was at school, when she was supposed to be visiting my mother or something, and she euthanized the little guy. To put it lightly, that's terrible, Jennifer said. Well, yeah, Greg said, but it taught me something important. Important lessons. You know, when people feel threatened, even by a relatively harmless animal minding its own business, they often want to end that threat. Could have been revenge, Patrick said. Hospital bills are no joke. I don't think that's it, Greg said. But anyway, can't bring it back no more than I can bring back my childhood. What are you gonna do? Well, we can try to solve this puzzle, Jennifer said. We might not be able to bring your old pet hamster back, but maybe we can still save our old human friend Sally. Or save her soul at the very least. Greg looked at her. Right, he eventually said. We went about the room and studied the clues more carefully. Here are the clues for the 4th floor puzzle. A giant-sized hamster or gerbil will large enough for people to run around in. It could not be moved or started from the outside. We did not want to get inside and try to move it from there yet, because we were afraid this would activate the puzzle. When we ran our hands over the inside of it, we found it to be very smooth. Maybe too smooth to get good traction on, but there were slightly raised metal bands along the inside, at about 6 feet intervals. These were also very smooth, suggesting you'd slip off of them if you tried to walk or run on them. A statue of a white elephant. The white elephant was probably a little over 4 feet tall and about 5 feet in length, not counting its trunk. We were able to move and even lift it, but it was solid and about as heavy as one of us. Its trunk curled out in front of it, forming a loop. A sparkling orb made of bottle caps. It was on a little pedestal atop an ordinary wooden coffee table. The orb was probably about 3 feet in diameter. Beside the entrance, a mound of what we thought likely is to be salt. Based on its appearance, we weren't about to test that stuff. This mound was roughly 3 feet across and about half an inch deep. A simple wooden broom with a dustpan. Greg's cartoony illustration on the wall of a gigantic hamster and a gigantic wheel running amok through a city, causing damage. Broken things and dead bodies lay in its wake. Despite its both goofy and grisly nature, you could tell how afraid the hamster was, even though it was the one causing all the damage. The hamster wheel puzzle appeared to be asking us to get inside and run, but how would we do that without violating the 4th rule? This was the rule we least wanted to break, because not only would the entities come after us, they'd be running, too. All signs pointed to us getting inside the giant hamster wheel, and running. It looked like we'd have to break the 4th rule. Greg's illustration of the giant hamster running on its broken wheel through a city made us think we had to do something like that ourselves. Well, the running part. The broken part made us think we were meant to break a rule. When it came to the white elephant, Jennifer mentioned something she'd learned in a university lit class from some Hemingway story about abortion. Something symbolic about a white elephant being a gift from kings to people they didn't like. A white elephant was a costly gift to maintain, and it was so revered that you couldn't put it to work to get your money back. It was a gift you didn't want. Patrick thought maybe it was related to Greg's hamster and the hospital bills his aunt had to pay after her bite got infected. Greg's sporadic mumblings while taking notes helped us to the conclusion that the glittering orb made of old bottle caps was related to a favorite saying of his when younger: one person's trash is another's treasure. Apparently, it was even an expression he reminded himself of nowadays when helping design advertisements. As for the salt, once we tried a little on the smooth surface of the inside of the wheel and ran our hands over it. It seemed like it would not give us a whole lot more traction when running inside. Then I remembered something I'd heard about how salt might keep out ghosts and demons, and I said as much to the others. We got ready to sweep it up using the broom and dustpan. Figured we'd put it in front of the room's opening. If those entities ran towards us once we broke rule number 4, once we got to running inside the wheel, Maybe that salt on the floor would stop them. For a while Greg had been pretty silent, mostly only jotting down and drawing things in his new sketchbook. But then he had a whole lot to say. "Dallin guys," Greg said. "I've done a fair amount of research on matters concerning ghosts and demons. I thought it would help with my doodles, back when I gave a hoot and wasn't a slave to the corporate system. Salt doesn't always work, and we don't know if the entities we have fall under those categories. Besides, we should take a moment to consider something important. You know how we were vague with some items in the house when we put them into the design as kids, and how we think the house might be, filling in the missing details. Well, we left the puzzles vague. I think it wants us to get into the wheel and run. I think it's using the salt to trick us into doing that. But we came up with the clues," Jennifer said. "Including the salt." "Sure, but that's why the clues all fit," Greg said. "Whether it's a piece we literally use to solve a puzzle, or just a hint at its solution. We did plan on each floor puzzle relating to one of us. That's why one person took care of the items in each puzzle room instead of us all handling them together. But, at that time, I think it was rather random. We didn't know how they'd all fit together. We weren't sure about the puzzles or didn't want to do them yet." "That's right," Patrick said. "And those items, at least for me, were placeholders. I remember thinking that once I figured out what my puzzle would be, I'd come back to it, change some of the things in the room to be more clue-like. But we didn't come back to it," Greg said. "We considered the house finished with the puzzles still nothing more than the things around them, with arrows or circles and the word puzzle pointing out where it would be." "No," I said. "We didn't finish. The house was complete, but not finished. There were some things we could have made better. We gave up. About the time we gave up on Sally coming back. Whatever the case," Greg said, "I'm pretty sure the house has been using what we put in each puzzle room to make up the puzzles for us. Maybe it's somehow tapping into our memories or subconscious to do that. Or maybe it's just using what's in the house. I don't know. Either way, it wants us to fail. If we put that salt down in front of the entrance, thinking the entities won't pass beyond it, and one of us gets in the wheel and runs, I believe we'd be doing exactly what it wants. We haven't seen these things run yet. I don't think we want to. We should exhaust all our other options first." Going back to the drawing board, which for Greg was back to his sketchbook note-taking, we returned to ways of making the wheel spin without any of us running inside it. That was a doozy, because we could not get it to budge from the outside, even when gripping the bands that ran at about 6 feet intervals along the interior. Somebody said something about the wheel needing a person's weight in there for it to spin. About how, if somebody just got in there, it would unlock the wheel's movement, and the others of us might be able to spin it from the outside while the other person was inside. The force of the spin could keep them in place. They wouldn't need to run. We had our concerns, though. What if the person inside lost their footing? Or the people outside made a mistake, and the person inside accidentally started running? That's about when we remembered that the white elephant statue, when we tried to move it, had seemed to weigh about as much as a person. The white elephant statue might not be so useless or burdensome after all. We hauled it and set it down beside the giant hamster wheel. "Let's hope it's worth its weight," Jennifer said. She gave it a little pat. I had an idea from something I'd seen another guy do in construction. After discussing it, we turned that treasure back into trash. We broke the sparkling globe of bottle caps. We swept up the salt into the dustpan and put it down inside the wheel where we would place the elephant. Then, similar to a kind of trick I'd seen someone in construction, who did not have their tools on hand, used to hold something in place temporarily, we put the bottle caps in among the salt. We faced some up and some down. Neither the teeth at the bottom of the bottle caps nor the salt were ideal for holding anything in place, much less the smooth wheel's interior to the relatively smooth bottoms of the elephant statue's feet. But if we used the salt and the toothy bottle caps in conjunction for a slight grip for when we got the wheel going, the force of its spin when we spun it faster might then be enough to keep the elephant statue in place. We used the broom for something other than just sweeping. We put it inside the little loop of the elephant's trunk. Our thinking was that the broom handle could function as a long handle we could all grip. Then we took deep breaths, did our little counting thing that by now had become a ritual, and together lifted the heavy elephant statue up and placed it onto the wheel. Something clicked. We didn't waste any time. If we waited too long after that click, we might fail the puzzle. Maybe we had already failed. There was enough space on the broom handle extending from the elephant's trunk for each to put our hands on it. It took us a little bit to get our rhythm in sync, but together we got the wheel moving. We had to get it going fast to keep the elephant from dropping. Faster. A little salt sprayed out the sides. The bottle caps alternated facing up and down. Held. Faster. The wheel was spinning at a running pace, but for all we knew the puzzle hadn't been solved. No doors opened up to us. My arms felt like they were being pulled out of their sockets. I imagined they'd keep going, still gripped on the broom handle once separated from my body. As the wheel was spun more and more frantically, I kept glancing at the crazed yet frightened cartoony face of the hamster in its giant will terrorizing the city in that illustration on the wall. The four of us and the white elephant statue got that will going so fast that I began to think it was a wonder it didn't break loose like the one in the illustration. That's exactly what it did. When the will finally broke loose from its frame, Greg yelled out for us to let go. I suppose it was a little similar to how he'd had to let go of his pet hamster when he was a kid. Except this physically hurt. Of course, the longer you held on, the more it would have hurt. The giant hamster wheel and the elephant in it slammed against the wall and toppled. I was surprised it didn't so much as put a dent or a crack in the wall. We were all groaning and rubbing our shoulders, arms, or hands. We sat for a while. No sign of the entities or their footsteps, but we sat facing the room's entrance just in case. Where the will had been, a hole had opened up under its frame. As we started to feel better, we got up and peered down into the hole. It was slanted like a laundry chute, or like a pitch black water slide tube without the water. Well, I said, we solved the puzzle, so this should be pretty straightforward. We debated it for a little, but then decided to risk it. Nothing else had opened up to us, and we knew, because of how we designed this house in Greg's old sketchbooks, that the door back through the ballroom would be locked to us. Not that we were eager to go back through there anyway, as we were starting to play rock paper scissors to decide who would go first. Patrick said, in an even, almost monotone, "Geronimo," and he disappeared down the chute. We waited for about a minute, then we called. When we didn't hear back, we decided to go down after him. We agreed to each wait about 30 seconds so as to avoid hitting each other. I went last. It was a long slide down in the darkness. I called out to the others as I went down it. No one replied back. I felt alone for the first time I'd been in that house. Then I heard agonized shouts up ahead. I tried to slow myself as much as I could by applying pressure to my heels and putting my hands against the walls. It hurt, but not as much as hitting my friends would. I heard them calling up to me. Patrick had slammed into a wall down there. He was hurt, moving my shoes to the side when I was really close. I avoided much of the impact with Jennifer in front of me. She grunted as both of us did our best to buffer the impact. I could see nothing, probably the darkest place I'd been in. Flashlights might have come in handy. Maybe they were considered electronic by the house, but we could have at least used a candle or gas lantern. Something. Patrick had checked ahead that electricity was running to the house. We'd banked on being able to use the house's lights that we had drawn in years ago, but we hadn't taken into account the secret puzzle corridors in between. By the way, that was something else we did not put into the house. I'm not sure if we forgot, or if we hadn't done it yet because we never made the puzzles. As far as we knew, the house made those secret corridors for us. Down there in the dark, we were pretty sure Patrick had broken one of his legs. I guess we'd all hoped that, due to some magic of the house, it would somehow deposit us from this slide or shoot down into the floor we'd been on above us. You know, paradoxes and everything. Seemed like the house like those. Instead, we just slid down and hit a wall. Hang on, Patrick said. There's some rungs above me protruding from the wall. I think we're meant to climb back up. Man, this hurts. Think you can climb? Pat, Greg said. Maybe, he said. If I can use only my arms and my good leg, we could help from below. Jennifer said. Just don't touch my right leg. Can't see it. Pat, Greg said. Can't see nothing. I'll let you know with a scream. Speaking of screams, something was sliding down towards me. I was the last of the four of us. Guys, I began. We've got comp. Something slammed into me. Luckily, it struck my shoulders and the top of my back and not my head. Even so, pain went up and down me, like my entire body had become a bad tooth. It took my mind off the chemical burns on the back of my hand that had still been somewhat bothering me. Fingers, or something like fingers, got into my hair. I tried to twist around to see if I could get some leverage on whoever or whatever was behind me, but it kept me from getting a good handle on it. Go up, I said. There's something physical in here with us. It's grabbing me. Grunting through his own pain, Patrick started to climb up the rungs, and Greg and Jennifer after him. I couldn't see them at all, but I heard them going up. I gave a warning in case it was a person, like Sally, in there with us. Told it to let go unless it wanted to get popped. Then I used all the strength I had from that position to strike behind me with my hands and elbows. I hit air. Dark, blank, dry nothing. When I climbed up behind the others, I kept thinking I felt something on my neck or back. Couldn't tell how much of that was the after effect of getting struck, or my imagination. There was light above. Kept thinking something would grab my foot and yank me down. It didn't. The ladder brought us back up to the 4th floor anteroom next to the stairs, where a panel in the floor had opened up. My pain after getting clobbered by whatever had been behind me was residing to a dull, tired throb. Patrick was hurt worse. However, he could stand and even walk on his foot. Though he hobbled, it seemed to be an ankle sprain rather than a broken bone. Even so, we had to comfort him as he expressed his worries of being a deadweight. Now I might as well have turned back before, he said as Jennifer and I got on either side of him. I got the feeling that ain't the case, I said. You took one for the team, Pat, Greg said. If not you for you, then someone else probably would have gotten messed up. Somebody had to go first. Hey, Jennifer said. We just have one more floor left. It was true. One more floor. And then the attic and whatever secrets it held. Secrets like the treasure. Propping Patrick up, we stood together facing the flight of stairs that would take us to the 5th floor.